So first we will remove the main cover, which you've done already. Next we're going to remove the back panel. I've loosened some of the screws just so this goes a little bit quicker, but you're going to remove this screw here, this screw here, and this screw. So I will remove the last screw that I haven't loosened. And then once the panel is free, we will also unscrew the knob for the water uptake. Unscrew it, take it out, lay it down, and then the panel just comes off the back. Okay. Next, we're going to focus on this lid here. There's one screw that you need to remove for the lid. So we'll take out this one screw. It's a Phillips head number 2 size screw. And once that screws out, we'll just lift this lid off the top. Next, we will focus on these 4 screws for the side panel. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll remove all 4 of these screws. And then once we are in with these removed, we will be in the PCB compartment where we're going to change the PCB boards. Okay. And then one more to go. It's important on the last one to support the panel because this piece here is kind of heavy. So you don't want it to fall down and scratch the paint or anything. So just support the panel a little bit while you take out the last screw. And put the screw in the parts bowl. Now just take this part out and lay it down on the side of the case, okay? First off, apologies if you see any strobe effect in the video. It's the LED headlamp. The strobe rate disagrees with the frame rate on the camera every once in a while. So just as a heads up, I've already removed all the screws and down here and for the AC board and all of these. So when you first start the video, I'm just gonna take this one out and pull the side panel off and start from there just to speed things up a little bit. We get down to the home stretch here on removing the side panel that has the DC PSU in it. And so we pull this out. We'll just lay it down next to the machine here and just leave it sit there. Next, to remove the AC board, we'll first remove the heater AC cable, then the group heater AC cable. And you can see I'm just tucking these out of the way just to give myself a little bit of room to work without too much involvement. And then lastly, the pump AC cable. And we'll also just tuck that over the top. Once that's out, as I told you before, I've already removed all the screws. We're going to remove the strap cable that connects the 2 boards just from the AC side. So just grab it with 2 fingers and kind of shimmy it off. And then once that's off, now the whole AC board is free to come away. And you can also just lay this over to the side a bit. Once that's out, we'll move on to the next video. Okay, so the next thing that really helps is if you remove the nut on the back side of both of the screws that hold in the IEC connection. It's just the Phillips head screw on the back side. And if you hold the nut with your finger, they're plastic. It will just create enough tension so that the screw can come out of it. So unscrew the screw in completely and then slide the nut out and then push the screw out. And the other one's a little tougher because it's wedged underneath, but just get some finger pressure against it and then unscrew that one as well until it comes out. And then remove that nut as well and pull it out. And now the IEC is free as well. And you can just push the IEC out as far as it'll go, and that creates, You can get the DC board out without doing this, but this just makes it so much easier. It creates a lot more space to work in. All right, Jamie, so now we've got the IEC out in the last video. Now we're just going to, using both hands, one at the top of the board and one at the bottom of the board, we're just going to start to pull the bottom of the board out so that this RJ45 connector starts to go around the fan. You might find that the bottom of the board catches on the ground cable. If so, just push the ground cable down. And lastly, the fan connector cable sometimes gets wrapped around a capacitor on the back of the board. If you start to feel tension when you lift this out like this, just check that capacitor. It's this one right here. Every once in a while, the fan cable is wrapped around that. Once you get the board out to about this position, start disconnecting from the bottom of the board. This is the solenoid cable. Then this is the fan cable. Pull that connector. This is the USB cable. You'll pull that connector. Next, this is the power supply 24-volt connector. Push this tab down and pull it straight up. It should come out. The last one is the temperature sensors, the manifold. You won't have this cable. This is the GHC cable. And then we'll pull out the water level up at the top of the board. And then in the center, you'll have the flow. And then you'll see that there's one connector that is not populated. That's correct. That's the second water level sensor, which we don't use at this time. Last, you can pull off this big strap cable because we'll put it on the new board. If you're not going to be using a new board, if you're just going to reuse the board, if you ever take the machine apart for some reason, like to put the GHC in, if you ever do the GHC upgrade, you don't need to remove this as part of that step. You can leave it on, but we'll take it off because we're changing the board. Next, flip the board over to the back, and you can see this is the Bluetooth module, BLE. You'll just pull that straight out of the connector. When you reinsert it on the new board, there are some extra pins. These legs that hang down here, those pins are extra and they will not be used. So when you reinsert it, the top pins on the board go into the connector, and the pins that hang off the legs are not in the connector, okay? So when you put that in the new board, do it that way. And lastly, there are two very small jumpers on this 4 rows of pins here, and they are positioned horizontally. So we'll pull those 2 jumpers off, and you will need to put them on the new board. And the way that I usually do it to make the most room and make it the easiest is do it with the board out. You can do it with the board in, but it's really finicky and you need a set of pliers. And you'll put the second jumper on the second set of pins, again, horizontally, and then put the first jumper on the top set of pins horizontally, and then you're all set on the new board. Okay? All right, Jamie, we've got our new board with the BLE and the jumpers installed, as well as the strap cable that jumps to the AC board. One note about this cable, it is possible to insert it with only one set of pins in. And if you do that and connect the boards and turn power on, it will blow both the DC board and the AC board because it will connect 2 bad circuits. It's possible to connect it that way. It's impossible to connect it one pin rode off the other way, but it's actually not very noticeable except to see the pins outside. So do make sure that the 2 rows of pins are installed properly. The same when you put this onto the AC board. So from there, with that warning, we'll now move over. We'll start reinstalling the cables. If you see the connector, on one side of the connector, you can see the crimps inside. On the other side of the connector, you cannot see the crimps inside. The side that you can see the crimps inside will always go toward the open side of the connector on the board, the open side and the closed side. So the closed side will be the side you can't see the crimps. So that's the flow meter, 3 pins. This 4-pin connector goes into water level. Again, water level 2, WL2, is not populated. I'll plug in my GHC here. You won't be doing that. Next, we will install the manifold connector, the wider of the 2 other connectors, and then the 7-pin temperature sensor connector. Next, we'll reinstall the locking connector for the power supply, the 24-volt power supply, then the USB connector, then the fan. You'll need to now, at this point, put the board inside the machine a little bit. The fan connector is a little bit different, but it's positive locking. You can install it backward. So the positive locks go towards the open side. And then this also has a locking connector. As you can see, the mating lock on the female side. So push that in. And then the same as we brought it in, you might need to just make sure that these cables don't get wrapped on the PEMs off the chassis. So you'll just pull those cables around the side. And now slowly and surely, I guess, just slowly work the board back in from the top to the bottom again. Slide that RJ45 connector here around the bottom of the fan, past the ground cable. And you should be able to work it into position fairly easily, just like that. And once you're there, put in a screw in this top corner and then a screw in the opposite side of the board on the bottom corner. And you should be all set to reassemble. Pop the AC board back in, pop this cable back on, and screw the AC board back in. Reconnect the 3 AC heater connections. And you'll be all set. Oh, actually, sorry. Before you put the AC board in, that's when you'll want to push the IEC back in and finagle the nuts on the bottom. This one is the toughest. Sometimes I use a flathead screwdriver. Your finger does fit under there, but it's tight. Depending on how my finger's big, and it can be a little bit difficult, but it's not impossible. So if you can get your finger in there, that's certainly the easiest because you can manipulate it fairly quickly and screw it in. And once it's all screwed in, the top one's quite easy. So the top one, you can just slide the nut around the top here and position it over the hole, like so. There's the hole. Position over the hole and pop the screw in and screw that IEC screw back in. And again, it is possible to do it without removing the IEC, but it is much, much, much easier to get the DEC board in and out. And so again, put the AC board in, connect the 2 strap cables together. Make sure after you connect this strap cable that you check from the top to see that there's no pins sticking out the side of that. And then screw it in, plug in your heater connections. The first one being the pumps, this 4-pin connector here, then the group heater, which is this 2-pin connector, and then the water and steam heaters. Then you're all set. Pop it back together and screw on your side panel with your PSU and you're all good.